So, quick little shill first off. Josh and I did a contemplations last week. It was my pleasure actually, in which we decided to apply the repressive tolerance that Harry and I spoke about in our book club to those who need to be exiled from the right. And we came up with a fairly lengthy list of names. Thank you to all the kind comments who agreed with us, and all of those that are whining about Sigma males, seethe and cope. Speaking of people that need to be exiled from the right, let's talk about our favourite warhawk, Liz Cheney, shall we?
Why not?
She's declaring that she might run for president, which is a staggering level of delusion. I haven't made a decision on 2024 yet, Ms. Cheney told CNN's State of the Union. I am really focused on the substance of what we have to do on the Select Committee, very focused on the work that I have to do to represent the people of Wyoming. I'll make a decision on 2024 down the road. Speaking of future presidential elections, she warned voters of her belief that our nation stands on the edge of an abyss. Now, she's obviously referring to the Select Committee here when she's speaking about the January 6th trial, which has just indicted Steve Bannon, who was unceremoniously sacked from the Trump administration but has remained very loyal to the president's project. Steve Bannon has been found guilty of contempt of Congress, but in his press address afterwards, he seemed almost victorious. He actually didn't show up to the subpoena and didn't provide any witnesses, etc. Bannon had vowed to fight against the misdemeanor from hell and go medieval on these people, but when it came time for the trial, he ultimately opted not to testify or call any witnesses in his defense. A sentencing date has been scheduled for October 2021. I believe he faced up to a year in jail for this trumped-up charge.
Surely if you're not in contempt of Congress, you're not paying attention, right? I mean, they deserve a lot of contempt. Obviously, this is a formal charge. It's different, but still.
Well, also, the January 6th committee is an entire show trial with no adversarial cross-examination. Yeah. But it is strange, I suppose people would say, that the Bannon, if he's declared his intention to fight, didn't go through the legal routes. And some are suggesting that his unwillingness to cooperate is actually an escalation tactic to kick things up to the Supreme Court, where questions about the events of 2020 will be raised, which we will not answer. Don't worry, YouTube. I want to thank the jury for whatever they did, Bannon said. The judge, particularly the court administration here. I have only one disappointment, and that is the gutless members of the show trial committee, the January 6th committee that didn't have the guts to come down here and testify. An 8-man, 4-woman jury in Washington, D.C. reached a decision. Bannon was reportedly smiling in the courtroom when the decision came down. His lawyer, David Schoen, argued Bannon has a bulletproof appeal. The trial was the first contempt of Congress trial since 1983, according to CNN. The first charge against Bannon was for his refusal to appear for a deposition before the House January 6th committee, and the second charge was for his refusal to produce documents. So, exactly, he has all the legalese on his side, he has good advice, but his unwillingness to cooperate seems to be a political strategy.
He's almost certainly planning something. If he's smiling in the court and he's not calling anyone to his defence, he's got something up his sleeve, hasn't he?
Well, the man who names his podcast War Room might be a bit of a clever strategist.
Who'd have thought?
But just like Steve Bannon, the Republicans themselves don't really care about January 6th, as we can see with Axios lamenting here that 4 out of 5 Democrats and a majority of independents report following the hearings, but fewer Republicans, 44%, say they're paying attention. And it doesn't actually break down by outlet here, because they could very well be following the hearings only via Steve Bannon's War Room, for example, or Jack Posobiec's Twitter account.
Would it also be partly because of the fact that they know it's going to be a show trial as well?
Well, yes, it seems that they're checked out because they know that the conclusion has already been reached in the minds of the accusers, and this is just a witch hunt. But it's also the 44% themselves could be following a very critical Republican-favourable outlet rather than the mainstream narrative. Since December, the percentage of Republicans who will call January 6th an insurrection and a threat to democracy increased from 10% to 12%, a shift smaller than the margin of error of the survey. But the most interesting number here is that 2 out of 5 Republicans say what happened on January 6, 2021 was a protest protected by the First Amendment, per the poll. Now, we don't endorse any illegal activities here on Lotus Eaters, but one might say, famous quote by Matthew McConaughey, those are rookie numbers. Democrats don't understand why their show trial isn't working, as we can see from this great article from Salon, which the wonderful John brought to my attention. They're even invoking the Lord's name in this, the baby killers, asking for divine intervention. It's kind of a strange one. How in God's name are the Democrats still losing, even after the January 6th hearings and Roe? There's a quote in here that just makes me cackle. Bertrand Russell, who famously said in a 1959 interview, "If we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet." This from the practitioners of repressive tolerance. It's hysterical that they genuinely don't understand why their unilateral worldview is not reaching the regular voter, who are more concerned about the price of fuel and groceries than they are about your strange political witch trial. So this has obviously resulted in a Republican red wave predicted for the November midterms. Republican vote, well, if they do anything. Republican voters made up 54.9% of the primary turnouts in Idaho, Kentucky, North Carolina, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, according to data compiled by JMC Analytics. That figure jumps to 60.9% of turnout when all 10 states that have held primaries this year so far are included. The picture was the exact opposite in 2018 when Democrats took control of the House with a net gain of 41 seats, so it's looking like they might sweep Congress. So far in 2022, overall voter turnout is up 13% from 2018. The number is driven by an approximate 30% increase in Republican voter turnout, while Democratic turnout is down 6%. So obviously this is tracking the same sort of metrics that the Virginia governor, Glenn Youngkin's victory had. We've also got a New York governor's race where the candidate, Lee Zeldin, was recently had a assassination attempt committed on him by a man dressed as a veteran. He walked up to him with brass knuckles with a blade and said, "You're finished," and Zeldin actually grappled with him and ended up wrestling him to the ground. It's very Dave Chappelle
normally helps
stage.
your election campaign if you have an assassination attempt, I know that much.
Yeah, well, obviously from Taxi Driver. And then Cheney's obviously being primaried on August 16th, so if you're a Republican voter in Wyoming, the very few people that live in that state, go out and vote her out. And let's hope Adam Kinzinger is next, because he sabotaged Madison Cawthorn's political career, and though Cawthorn might have been a bit cringy on camera a couple of times, his expose of the sex parties in Congress, which we can all very much believe from Bohemian Grove, got him ousted, which seemed unfair.
I didn't actually hear about that.
But yes, Madison Cawthorn turned around and said, "Okay, I've been offered sex and drugs while in Congress," and it was from some people from my own side of the aisle. And he got mysteriously primaried.
That's strange, isn't it?
How odd that the Uni Party doesn't like smears. So then we have President Trump wading into the debate, and this is just where things start to get excellent. Trump's endorsements have seemed pretty good. He's got a good batting average, and some of them have been pretty positive. For example, Carrie Lake, the former journalist who's running for governor of Arizona, is wanting to ensure that free and fair elections continue to be held in the state of Arizona, of course. Then we have her excoriating CNN for fake news. We had the CNN reporter asking her, it's the prior one, John, don't worry, asking her if we can get an interview, and she said, "Oh, can we do this on CNN Plus? Oh wait, it's already closed down." And she's also promised to finish the state's proportion of the wall with the state budget because the Democrats won't do it. And apparently some of the materials are just laying out in the open.
Yeah, in Texas at least, I know that the locals actually had to pay with their own money to continue rebuilding the wall, and I think Greg Abbott has been trying to get the funds to actually start rebuilding it in Texas.
Well, he's done the wonderful thing of busing the illegals to New York and Washington.
Yeah, I covered that when it happened.
Yeah, and well, so the update is that this week New York and Washington are saying, "Oh, because of our housing policy, because we're obliged to provide asylum seekers education and shelter, we're being bankrupted, so we can have more federal funds, please." And it's almost
that's kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that really lost on them?
It seems so, because the answer to socialism is never give up, it's just more money. Then there's also Lauren Boebert, who he's endorsed, which I want to go to the next one, just because Lauren Boebert was hit with some disgusting smears. And Boebert, again, is one of those Republicans who might be a bit cringy in the excess American-style patriotism for us Brits, but she was accused of being a former prostitute, having multiple abortions, covering up her past, and it turns out that a Democratic Action Committee had gotten a tip that was just completely bogus, posted it all over Twitter, and had to retract, and it's very embarrassing for them, and I just want to spotlight this so that, one, her career isn't smeared, and two, that we continue to embarrass this kind of fake news that we're often accused of peddling. Unfortunately, some of the batting average hasn't been perfect from President Trump's endorsements. Jack Posobiec's been on a tirade exposing Dr. Oz, who's one of the daytime TV hosts. If we go to the next link, the Post-Millennial, Dr. Oz seemed to endorse red flag laws on his talk show by saying hopefully most states would adopt them. In 2019, Dr. Oz questioned the definition of what a fetus heartbeat qualifies as, and he was highly skeptical about the abortion limitations placed surrounding that. But in 2021, he's apparently broadly about the sanctity of life. And in 2022, Dr. Oz praised the Chinese system of lockdowns in an NBC interview spot, touting their proclaimed drop in pandemic case numbers as fantastic news. Now in 2022, he abhors such practices and openly doubts the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine, which obviously we do not do, YouTube. We are just reporting what this man says. Please don't cancel us. Earlier this year, Politico published an analysis that highlighted how Dr. Oz's show had connections to China through sponsorship through the USANA Health Sciences Company. And then he also agrees with transing the kids. Regarding transgenderism, in 2010, Dr. Oz promoted transgender children as an upcoming trend of the decade. Well, he's right on that one. He hosted a pair of families and gave them glowing interviews on his program and openly questioned the upheld standards of beliefs about biology. Other resurfaced clips of Dr. Oz include him supporting Jussie Smollett on his talk show in the aftermath of the Empire Actors staged hate crime in 2019. So this man is a snake in the grass.
He's like a walking PR disaster for his own campaign. Like, every one of his beliefs are basically wrong for the voter base.
Well, I believe
he's trying to appeal to.
I believe he was parachuted into Pennsylvania when he isn't a Pennsylvania resident, then ran off of Trump's endorsement, and then the moment the Trump endorsement was secured and he took the lead in the primary, he deleted Trump from his campaign materials. So it's just grifting, that's all it is. However, the Democrats are taking a very strange strategy about these MAGA candidates, because I saw a piece in the Washington Post that said they're having trouble fundraising, but apparently the Democrats are very keen to help them out. So Democrats have been funding Dan Cox's campaign. The Maryland's Republican contest for governor was the third election this year in which Democrats have effectively teamed up with Republicans loyal to former President Trump to help a far-right candidate win a blue state primary. Polls showed that once Republican voters were told Mr. Cox, who had spent just $21,000 on TV and radio advertising, had been endorsed by Mr. Trump, he held staunchly conservative views on abortion, and his advantage ballooned. The Democratic Governors Association proceeded to spend more than $1.16 million on TV ads, reminding Republican voters of Mr. Cox's loyalty to Trump and his pro-life views and his endorsement. So, if January the 6th is truly a threat to democracy, why are they astroturfing these evil Republicans who want to tear asunder the normative rules of the Republic?
I think in their deluded worldview, they think that somehow him being linked to Trump and those views are somehow going to damage his appeal to Republican voters, which is obviously not true, and they've just shot themselves in the foot by spending lots of money helping him out, more or less.
Well, this comes back to the misunderstanding of why isn't January 6th working. It's because we don't share your delusional narrative. I can't remember the gentleman who said it, Scott something, but he said we are genuinely watching two movies on different screens at this point and yelling at each other why the endings don't line up. And this is actually causing discord within the Democrat camp. As we see with the Daily Beast here, they're terrified about the Democrats' strategy backfiring. I love this graphic of them just throwing their own money on the MAGA fire, because also I love the idea of MAGA coming in and torching, figuratively speaking, the Democrat and Rhino Republican uniparty's norms that have cost the American taxpayers untold trillions in the past. In Arizona, Democrats are helping Trump-backed candidate Carrie Lake, good girl, by thanking her more mainstream primary opponent for past donations to Democrats. Her primary opponent is also a dubious figure who was married up with a man that's X amount of years older and taken lots of money, and yeah, she's not very good. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker and the DGA spent $35 million on ads to help a far-right senator win Illinois' Republican gubernatorial primary. In Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, spent $840,000 to boost Trump-endorsed election-denying Senator Doug Mastriano. According to Open Secrets, this was more than double what Mastriano on his own ad buys. The writer then nails and washes his teeth at this. I can only imagine what it will feel like if Democrats wake up with a hangover on November 9th to discover that one or more of the election-denying Trumpers they elevated had won office. How will they explain it to their voters? How will they explain it to their donors? How will they explain it to their grandchildren? How will Shapiro explain it to his wife? Probably just call her a doctor. So I think the reason they're lamenting this so much is because they saw how unsuccessful it was in 2016. If we go to the next one for Salon, how Hillary Clinton campaign deliberately elevated Donald Trump with its Pied Piper strategy. So the vanity of the Clinton campaign was that she thought he was so extreme, he was the most easily beatable. And
well,
so
it was also
Trump's
strategy to manipulate the media in a way that it gave him free press while he didn't have to spend any money. And that was a deliberate strategy on his part, which he'd learnt from lots of other political campaigns abroad. And it's actually very clever. And the fact that they underestimated him because they bought into how he put himself across in public speaking, well, that was their own mistake, really, wasn't it?
This was a point made by Razorfist in his post-election video as well. He said, it's funny how the Democratic National Committee forgot in their conceitedness that Trump's household name brand recognition is at least double that of the previous president named Clinton that you were married to. And so you could have all of the locker room talk scandals you like and all of the fake P-tape dossiers. It's not going to derail the Trump train, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of the Trump train, what is Trump doing if he wins another term? Well, if he gets his third term, we have Axios here, Jonathan Swan, who's been covering this all week and crying an untold amount of tears. A radical plan for Trump's second term. God, we only hope. Former President Trump's top allies are preparing to radically reshape the federal government if he is elected, purging potentially thousands of civil servants and filling career posts with loyalists to him and his America First ideology, people involved in the discussions tell Axios. So he's looking to promote the likes of Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mark Meadows and Kash Patel, but Mike Pence, his daughter Ivanka Trump, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner are out of his circle of advisors.
I heard about this. That's very strange, isn't it? That
I don't think it's strange. Because they were advising him to do more social justice-oriented policies, but with a Republican name brand. So it's not like criminal justice reform wasn't a valid thing to do. It's just in the way it was done, it was not particularly excellent because he had more lenient sentencing. And that's not the thing that Republican voters cared about.
His own family are advising him to be more progressive. That's somewhat depressing for Trump. I feel a little bit sorry for him.
But Jared Kushner is very much a sort of... I'd say he's in the international financial class.
Yes.
So he's the kind of... He wouldn't look out of place running for the Conservative Party leadership over here.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has then complained bitterly about his wacko national security advisor John Bolton. Valid, because he keeps going around saying about how America should interfere more and besmirching Trump's good name. His weak attorney, General Bill Barr, who was completely inactive on the 2020 riots and 529, the 29th of May insurrection, where Trump was sent into a bunker because they tried burning down a church. His rhino Republican Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, and his woke chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, who the former president sometimes says should be charged for treason, which I
absolutely
agree with.
I mean, I'm amazed that he hasn't already done all of this stuff before he even left office in 2020.
Well, he was hamstrung. Also, Trump has the flaw of if people are around him flattering him, he does take them in good faith. And people lied to him about withdrawing from Syria and Afghanistan, for example. They said they had no troops there in certain regions, and they did. So he was actively being sabotaged. So in order to safeguard against that future saboteurism, Trump allies are working on plans that would potentially strip layers at the Justice Department, including the FBI, and reaching into national security, intelligence, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Schedule F was an executive order signed 13 days before the 2020 election, which Biden rescinded in 2021. Thanks to Section 7511 of the Title V of the U.S. Code, Trump can only fire federal employees if their terms of employment become reassigned. Schedule F status would therefore strip 50,000 civil service of Title V employment protections, making them functionally at-will employees and far easier to fire. Such pendulum swings and politicization could threaten the continuity and quality of service to taxpayers, the regulatory protections, the checks on executive power, and other aspects of the American democracy, the uniparty press lament. But personally, I think a mass federal exodus of all of these deeply entrenched deep state operatives would be brilliant, not only for the American taxpayer, but for governmental transparency. God bless the God King for doing so.
Drain the swamp. That's what he wanted to do. Well, hopefully he can actually do it.
Well, this is a recapturing of the cathedral. This is all it is. This is what we've been endorsing for ages. The apparatus are too instantiated to take down all at once, but all you can do is flood it with your people and over time repeal the terrible bureaucratic red tape and the institutional culture of ideological capture. So I thought we'd finish just with some fun clips, because he appeared at Turning Point Action Conference a couple of days ago now. He was immediately blanked off the feed as soon as he started talking about the 2020 election. But we can look forward to some more common sense and an actual fun first son in the White House, because Donald Trump Jr. seems just as cogent and hilarious as his father. Let's play the first clip.
You see it every day, and even the rhino Republicans, folks.
There's no sound.
Right? Yeah, this is a totally bipartisan level of incompetence, grift, and graft. Right? You saw a couple of weeks ago the Ukrainian minister's wife. She was caught crossing the border. I guess it was either into Hungary or Romania. Right? With roller bags. Roller bags filled with $17 million in U.S. cash. How do you think that happens, folks? I don't know. She probably worked a side job really hard. Maybe she has an OnlyFans account.
It's always nice to hear some mockery
you never know, folks.
Of the Ukrainian Uniparty. He then, 35 minutes in, mocks pronouns and the CIA military adverts about the Disney princess with two mothers and the guy who apparently had extreme anxiety and said he wouldn't last 5 minutes under pressure by being interrogated by the Chinese. And then we do have 1 second clip, which I do have to play, where he speaks about Hunter Biden and the ongoing pandemic, which obviously is going to affect all sexualities of monkeypox. Do we have that, John?
You guys are seeing it. You know it's coming. The monkeypox pandemic, folks. Monkeypox, it's very scary. The World Health Organization. Oh, I know. They just declared it a major concern. Now, I don't know about you, but and I won't even say it here because no matter what I say, I will be criticized. But if you look at how you can get it, I mean, I don't know. Seems like it'd be rather easily avoidable unless you're Hunter Biden.
It's low-hanging fruit, but fair enough.
I don't know.
I think a lot of prostitutes.
You're not showing up at a truck stop somewhere, doing some random stuff with, seems like it'd be easily avoidable, but.
Yeah, so then
what we know-
he goes on after that, and good on Don Jr. as well, considering he's just lost his mother, and so the whole family getting together and still attending
He's
this
no
conference.
Hunter Biden, is he?
No, exactly. No, he doesn't know the weight of meth if it hit him in the face. He then does turn around and say, "Oh, obviously, if there would be a double standard if I was caught with even one micro element of something that Hunter Biden's been caught with, but." It seems like Hunter Biden criminal charges might be being pursued, so that would be wonderful. Then his dad comes on afterwards, and he jokes about giving himself the Congressional Medal of Honor because the Air Force landed in Iraq, Air Force One, with no lights off, etc. And he said he didn't think it would be appropriate, but that's a shame. And then a bunch of lefties online clipped it out of context and took him seriously, when obviously he's just a stand-up comedian. But then perhaps the most telling element about his future presidential run was that he concluded the speech not with the YMCA after the village people so stunningly and bravely complained about President Trump after doing so much to combat AIDS in the 80s. He concluded the speech by playing Sam and Dave's Hold On, I'm Coming. So I think that's quite a telling thing of our political future.
Yeah, he's definitely foreboding a run, isn't he?
Yes, he just doesn't want to say anything because of his finances and the Electoral Committee scrutinising him. But the Lotus has actually reached out to President Trump for comment, and this is what he said.
I'm going to come.
God bless you,
Oh,
President
dear.
Trump. We look forward to your next term.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series, this one on the Anglo-Japanese timeline. And if you want to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.